people, and welcome to another episode of Flight Review on the road. How about that? My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. I am trying something new. Doesn't sound like I'm in the studio, does it? Because I'm not. I'm on the way home. Why am I on the way home? Well, I just saw Tron at my favorite theater, the Imagine Palladium in Birmingham, and I am headed home, and I have this thought. I've been thinking about this for a while. I said, the best time for me to actually record an episode of Flight Review is on the drive home, because I don't live close to my favorite movie theater. I don't. It's a pretty decent drive, a long drive. This is essentially my drive home, same as I do when I record episodes of Flight Speed for those of you that are members of the Patreon, patreon.com/theflightcast. So I said, all that time when the movie is fresh in my brain and I'm thinking about it, I've got all the, I'm recalling and I'm processing everything that I've seen. That's the best time to record this. That's the best time to do this. I actually did that on TikTok a couple of weeks ago when I went to go see Him, which I did not record a flight review of. I should have, because I don't think I did. I don't remember doing one. But at any rate, yeah, I recorded it. And I didn't mean for it to be as long as it was. It ended up being like a 12-minute long video review that I posted on TikTok for that particular movie. And I thought, that's not a bad idea to just do it in the car on the way home, right? It's a decent amount of traffic. I'm going to be on the road for a bit, and yeah, there's going to be a bit of background noise. I had a plan for that. I actually was going to bring my wireless mics, and I completely forgot to bring them on my way to work, so can't do that today, but I'm definitely going to do that next time, because I think I might get some better sound with respect to my wireless mics and being in this car. But at any rate, that's what this episode of Flight Review is. A flight review on the road, which might become the format for this particular show, at least for new movies, right? At least for ones that I go see at the theater, not necessarily ones that I see at home or watch, like on streaming or, one of my new Blu-rays or anything that I got, right? Anything that I went to the theater to see, anything brand new, probably this is going to be the format going forward. At least I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how it goes. You guys let me know what you think with respect to the format. So here we go. I'm going to talk about Tron, the third film in what is now, as of this point, a Tron trilogy, if you will, because don't think Disney isn't going to sell it as that at some point down the road. But before diving headfirst into what will be spoiler-filled thoughts, and I'm not necessarily going to completely blab every detail about the movie, but there are some spoiler things that I do want to talk about with this particular film, with respect to the format. And I'm going to follow the regular format of Flight Review like I normally do in terms of segmenting when I talk about each aspect of the film, so don't worry about that if that's something that you follow along with. But before diving into all of that, I got to do the obligatory disclaimer. I got to remind everybody, especially those of you that are listening to this for the first time, that you can find this show, Flight Review, and all of my other shows at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcast. That includes Google Podcasts, which no, not Google Podcasts anymore, YouTube, the Flightcast YouTube channel, youtube.com/theflightcast is where you can find this episode and others. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts. That's what I meant to say originally. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Pandora. Just type in the Flightcast or whatever podcatcher you use. You can find the Flightcast. You'll find this show. You'll find the main show. It's kind of been on hiatus the last week or so. I haven't really had. It's not that I have anything to talk about. It's the schedule has been hectic. I've been working on this other big Flightcast-related project that I've been talking about for the last week or so, if you will. So, yeah, just been kind of busy. But Flight Chat, the feedback show that I do on the weekends, that's where I read all your emails. We have our discussions about movies, TV, and other sort of media from the listener feedback session. Yeah, that's always on the weekends. And then, of course, Flight Box, the TV review show. And don't worry, on my way home, when I get home, actually, we're coming up to some traffic here, so we're going to be slowing down a little bit. This is 75 for you. This is I-75. That is what it does. It's just what it does. But at any rate, Flight Box, when I get home, I'm watching Peacemaker season finale. And I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, Saturday, October 11th, the day after I recorded this episode, which is Friday, October 10th, the day of Tron release date, if you will, an opening day watch for this particular film. But yeah, I'm talking Peacemaker season finale. I have not watched it yet. I'm in the bubble. I've stayed off Threads. I've stayed off Facebook. I've stayed off Reddit. I've stayed off social media entirely. And my God, has it been peaceful? You have no idea how peaceful it is to not be without social media until you actually take a break from it. And boy, we are about to come to a parking lot standstill on this freeway. Whatever. More time for me to talk about this movie. But at any rate, I will be watching the season finale of Peacemaker, Season 2, when I get home, and I will share my thoughts, my honest thoughts and feelings on that, and the DCU, and maybe dive into whatever the chatter is. I don't even know what the chatter is. I have no idea, because I am definitely trying to avoid spoilers just in case anything big happened. I have a feeling it didn't. I have a feeling that, as we do with normal fandom brains, I set myself up for a whole lot of things that didn't happen, but not to the extent of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness for other people, where they just thought that we were going to get a massive amount of incredible cameos and whatnot. No, nothing like that. But I will give my honest thoughts on Flight Box, which I will post tomorrow on Saturday, October 11th, the day after this particular release. And you can find all that and the other shows at theflightcast.com, or again, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who is a very loyal and faithful supporter of patreon.com/theflightcast. Those of you that have subscribed, those of you that want to hear my dulcet tones further with some extra bonus content, thank you so much for your support. Thank you. Hope that you are appreciating all of the bonus content that is there, and the more bonus content to come. I have some reviews in the bank that I need to post. Seriously, I really need to just sit down, record some more episodes of Flight Review, because there are some movies that I've watched, right? All the movies I watched on San Francisco, I only reviewed one of them, right? Iron Giant was not the only one that I did so far. I've still got to review Black Bag, and I've got to review Mickey 17, right? I've got to talk about those. And there's other movies that I've watched in the last couple of weeks or so that I definitely need to talk about, and some more that I need to watch that I need to talk about. So stay tuned for those episodes of Flight Review. At some point, I got to start reading comics again, especially since my DC Universe Infinite subscription is active now. It's active, and what the hell have I read? Got some stuff to read. Seriously, I do. I need to record some more episodes of Flight Report with respect to that. And other bonus content as well. Of course, Flight Speed, which is the show that I normally do in my car on the way home from work, and Friday Flight, which I might do one of those today. I don't know. Maybe after I watch Peacemaker, I will. Perhaps. We'll see how that goes. But either way, if you're a flight crew member, you'll have access to, at the least, Flight Speed and Friday Flight, as far as the episodes that you can listen to. Being a flight crew member, if you're a flight officer, you have access to everything. That includes all the other bonus episodes of Flight Review and Flight Report and Flight Box and whatnot, and some other episodes of Flight Chat. Also, Saturday Soliloquy, which is the show that I do whenever there isn't a Friday flight, generally speaking. So I might get off this freeway because, you know what, I'll stick by it. I'll be patient. I'll be patient today and stay on this freeway. But thank you to those of you very loyal supporters of patreon.com/theflightcast. And as always, hope that you're enjoying the bonus content. Cannot thank you enough, seriously, for your support to the Flightcast Patreon network. All right, so let's get into it. I've got some thoughts here with respect to Tron Ares. Now, full disclosure, I am definitely a diehard fan of the Tron movies, right? I don't know that I've talked a whole lot about them. I wasn't doing this show when Legacy came out. No, it's been that long, right? 15 years. Tron Legacy came out 15 years ago. That's crazy. But you got to go all the way back. For me, my history with the Tron franchise goes all the way back to the first time that I watched the very first movie. And that was completely by accident. I think I've mentioned before, either on the main show or on Patreon, that when I was a kid, my grandmother used to babysit for us in Detroit. And what would happen is, a lot of times as I got older, right, she had cable in the house. She actually got cable, I don't know, it felt like a week or a month, a couple of weeks or a month before we ended up getting cable in the early 90s in Detroit. And what happened was, she had cable in the bedroom, and there were a couple TVs in the house. And initially, she had cable in the basement with a big brown fuzzy couch that was really cold in the summers. And she also had cable in the den upstairs, which was across the hall from my Uncle Dave's room, because he was still living in the house at the time. And so what would happen is, I'd get over there, and basically the den, at first it was the basement with the big brown fuzzy couch, but later on it became the den upstairs, would just become my hangout space. And I would be up there just basically playing with Legos and watching any amount of television, right, with respect to shows or movies, anything like that, because I had the run of the cable box. It was a full-blown cable box. Grandma had not all the premium channels. She had HBO, she had Cinemax, and she had Showtime, right? She had those three. She didn't have the movie channel. She didn't have this Disney Channel. Didn't have any of the other premiums. But that was enough, right? Enough movies came on HBO, Cinemax, and Showtime for me to be entertained. And so one day, I'm flipping through channels at Grandma's house. And all of a sudden, I see this dude in jeans sitting at a computer terminal get zapped by a laser. And it's like, oh, what in the heck? And this is, you gotta mind you, this is around the time, early 90s, when I first started getting into science fiction, right? I'd seen Star Wars. I was getting into Star Trek. Like, I was freshly being, like, initiated into science fiction as a genre. And I see a dude get zapped by a laser and he become digitized, right? And then I see all these crazy digital patterns. And then the dude reappears wearing a hockey helmet and this crazy blue laser line get up. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I didn't say that because I did not curse when I was a kid, but in my head, basically a WTF moment. I had no idea what this was, but I was intrigued. Completely intrigued. I had to watch it. I had to continue watching it. Here's how I know for a fact that I was like getting into Star Trek at the time and that I had seen a decent amount of like almost all the Star Trek movies at the time, because at that point in time, there was only 6. There were only the original. That's how long ago this was. The TNG movies hadn't been released yet. TNG might have still been on the air at this point in time, right? Like, it might not have even finished. In fact, it probably didn't, right? This last year was 94. At any rate, I recognized that the movie, obviously, that I was watching was Tron, the very first Tron film. And I recognized David Warner, the actor who plays Sark. He plays Ed Dillinger, head of NCOM, who stole the original Space Paranoid stuff and the video games from Flynn in the original, like, in the first place, with the help of the MCP. Like, I recognize that actor from Star Trek. Why? Because at that point, he had been in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, as St. John Talbot, a Federation representative. He had been Chancellor Gorkin in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and I think I'd even already seen him in Chain of Command, that awesome 2-parter, you know, from the 6th season of TNG, right? There are 4 lights. If you're a Trekkie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Amr, if you're listening, you know what I'm talking about. Alex, disregard what I just said. I did. You'll cross that bridge when you get there. You're all the way back on season 4. It's all good. At any rate, so I knew David Warner. So I recognized him. I didn't know anybody else. I didn't know Jeff Bridges. I didn't know Bruce Boxleitner, because even though Babylon 5, I think, was also out at that time, I wasn't watching it religiously. The only thing I had watched of Babylon 5, really the only thing still, fully, that I've watched of Babylon 5 religiously is the TV movie The Gathering, which didn't feature Bruce Boxleitner originally, but it did feature, oh man, I cannot remember her name. Oh, Tamlin Tamita, thank you. Oh, that would have killed me if I'd forgotten that. At any rate, so, Tron. This is how I watched the very first Tron film. On cable, and I mean, it blew me away. The visuals, like the light cycle stuff, the disc games, the Wendy Carlos' score, I was like, this is phenomenal. What an awesome movie. And it was one of those movies that whenever it came on cable, I had to watch it. Had to watch it. Just let me stop whatever I'm doing, put this on. This is awesome. Like, it just was really good. And, you know, the whole video game thing. You know who else I recognize? I can't think of his name off the top of my head because I'm not at the computer to look it up, and I'm not going to pick up my phone to do so while I'm driving. But the actor who plays Ram, he was also Billy the Kid in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I recognized him too, so that was cool. At any rate, loved that movie as a kid, you know, and it just became one of those like cult classics for me personally. It's like, yeah, I really dig this movie. And of course, you get older, right? Get into high school, get into college especially, and you find other nerds that are like, yeah, this movie was absolutely awesome. We loved it. It was great. And that's where the groundswell of like cult classic appreciation came from when they decided to develop the sequel, Tron Legacy, and we all got excited. I mean, this is college years by now. We all got super excited. They're making another Tron movie. Holy shit. And on top of that, Daft Punk is doing the soundtrack. Hell yes. Absolutely. We were all about it. Seriously. Because for those of us that have grown up as fans of Jeff Bridges, we largely know him as one of 2 characters. He's either the dude or he's Flynn. One of the 2, right? I mean, he's both, obviously. But whichever one is your favorite, and don't get me wrong, I love Big Lebowski. I'm a Coen Brothers fan. I own that movie as well. But Flynn is the first thing. Kevin Flynn, first time I ever saw Jeff Bridges in anything. Fantastic actor. But Tron Legacy, I remember we all went to see that as a group in IMAX. And I remember that opening sequence made us dizzy. It was a very dizzying sequence to open that movie up. It was really awesome with the IMAX cameras and the zoom in and all that. And it was a solid film. It was a solid film. I enjoyed it. Garrett Hedlund, Olivia Wilde. Solid movie in 2010, right? And then, it just goes quiet. It's like, okay, well, it didn't bomb. And I keep seeing people these days talking about how Tron Legacy bombed. It didn't bomb, per se. $429 million, I think, is what it made in box office on an over $100 million budget. That's not exactly bombing in 2010. But, again, it's all relative with respect to what the studio considers a success financially or not. Why we're so worried about it, it's just become another pissing contest for us to have with respect to films, to justify our nonsense narratives. But at any rate, enjoyed the movie, and as time has gone on, I've found more and more people that really do enjoy Tron Legacy, and that was their entry point into the franchise. The first film is too old for them. It's not too old for me, obviously, because, like I said, I grew up with it. That movie came out the year that I was born, right? And so, being an elder millennial, that was my entry point into it. But I know so many other people, I have so many other friends that Legacy was their entry point into it. So, for a long time, it was just the Tron duology. That's what it's been until now. And, honestly, wasn't even certain. Development hell had surrounded the idea of making a third Tron movie for a long time. And whether Disney was going to pull the trigger on it or not, no idea. Wasn't counting my chickens, wasn't expecting anything. And then I remember the first teaser trailer came out, and they're like 9 Inch Nails doing the soundtrack. And you heard that theme, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be, yep, sometimes you just watch a trailer, sometimes you just hear music, and you go, that's going to work. That's going to work. At least for me, subjectively speaking, that's what I was thinking when I first watched the trailer, right? And so I said, okay, October 10th, hey, I'm gonna go see that. I'm gonna go check that out. And I tell you what, I'll get this out of the way right here and there with respect to this, because I know that when it comes to the idea of even watching this movie, there are probably some of you that have absolutely no interest, if you're even listening to this review, that have no interest in seeing this movie purely because of its lead actor, Jared Leto. And I will admit, this is absolutely one of those separating the art from the artist situations, because if you're somebody that does not find Jared Leto even remotely non-problematic, considers him extremely problematic, and the fact that Disney hired him to star in this movie, if that is a deal breaker for you, understandable, completely understandable. For me, I can sum it up with what I answered. Someone on Threads posted this the other day, and they said they weren't happy with the decision to cast Leto in the title role, but allegedly, and I haven't really dug into the details of this at all yet, but allegedly, this movie wouldn't even exist if it weren't for him being a super fan of Tron, because it went through such development hell, went through a bit of a soft reboot phase, and it kind of is a soft reboot, not entirely, but kind of. And basically the idea is that this movie literally wouldn't exist without him, so they were asking the question, would you rather have a third Tron movie with Jared Leto attached, or no Tron movie at all? And I feel like it's easy for a lot of people to simply say no Tron movie at all, right? They can stand on their moral principle and act like they're better than everybody else because they say, well, I'm never going to support anything that Jared Leto does. Let's be clear here. You're not directly supporting everything that Jared Leto does just because you decide to go see that movie. And as I've said many times, any movie that you go see from any of these studios, some piece of shit, some deplorable asshole piece of shit is connected to it. Someone. Right? Just because you don't know who they are or what they've done doesn't excuse it if you're going to go off of that rule. If you're going to say, I'm not going to support this, then no, Hollywood is full of this shit. Unfortunately, it's not good. It's not sanctionable, but this is why you have to separate the art from the artist. And the other thing, this is why I do. This is why I think a number of people can, if you will. And for me, the thing that I posted, my answer was I would rather have a third Tron movie because of all of the other cast and crew, the non-problematic cast and crew attached to this film that got paid and now have a big budget Disney feature film rather to put on their resume, to put on their portfolio, if you will, that they did this film. Whoever it is, cast, crew, whatever, right? All the non-problematic actors and crew that got a chance to work on this film, right? Like, that's the thing. You cancel a movie, you cancel a project, and you cancel everybody else. You hurt everybody else in that regard. And I do not want to do that just because of one dipshit, whoever it might be, whether it's Leto or, some of the other more deplorable individuals, unfortunately, that have been found out with respect to stuff. And Leto's stuff, there's a lot of speculation and whatnot, but I just wanted to point that out. I didn't have to talk about that, but that is something that I always do think personally is something to mention, the whole separating the art from the artist. I can do that, but it's also a very subjective situation. There are some cases where subjecting the art from the artist is more difficult to do. Might be more difficult for you than it is for me, and vice versa, depending on who it is, depending on the situation. But just wanted to get that off the bat, get that out of the way right off the bat, as I continue to slowly drive through traffic here. But at any rate, went to go see this on opening day, right? Went to my favorite theater, saw it in the IMAX glory, if you will, and I definitely have quite a few thoughts with respect to this particular film. And of course, we begin with high-level thoughts. I really liked it. Seriously, I really dug the film, truthfully. And, this is one of those cases, again, where I have to look at fandom and go, okay, guys, so for everybody that thought this wasn't that great of a movie, right? And I've seen the Hellsite scores. It's 55% rotten on the Hellsite as far as the critics are concerned. 86% fresh on the popcorn meter. Okay, so this is another one of those cases where the audience sticks it more than the critics. But the critic score also isn't, horrible, right? Like, it's not BVS in that regard, or Venom in that regard, right? Like, it's a higher, it's only 5% away from freshness. So it's not like the critics necessarily were like, kill it with fire. No, they're not treating it that way. But they're calling it disappointing, they're calling it lifeless, they're calling it a slog, etc. All of the superlatives and all the adjectives they just love injecting their own bullshit-ass opinion with. Okay. And I've seen other people on threads say the same thing, right? Like, this is what they were doing. They spent however many years on a Tron sequel, and this is what they give us. Seriously, this is the best they can do. And my question to you, if you feel this way, is what the hell were you expecting? I mean this, literally. What the hell were you expecting from a Tron movie? Now, maybe this is because my perspective comes from being an elder millennial that at this point in my life, in my early 40s, I don't feel like hating shit anymore. I just don't. I don't feel like drinking a tall glass of haterade every time I see a film that, may not be exactly what I thought it. The film did subvert my expectations. I went into it thinking it was going to be a different type of story than it was, but not in a bad way, at least not for me, to be honest with you. It was a far more personal story, character-wise, than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a grand-reaching, overarching spectacle, and I really need to stop thinking that of these movies, because that also got me in trouble a little bit with respect to Peacemaker. I'm thinking of all these big, grander ideas, and it's like, no, it's a character drama, it's a character study. We're going to delve into this part of the character, and that part of the character, right? But fans, we do this. We place these huge, gargantuan expectations on a next installment of a franchise that's one of our favorites, whatever it might be. And it's like, really? I mean, why can't we just accept the story for whatever the creatives have decided to give us in that regard? And I feel like most of the time when fans are disappointed, it's because, again, it boils down to that one sentence. They didn't do what I wanted them to do. And you know what? That's fine. You want to be disappointed? You want to sit there and act like, oh, well, this is really not that great. I can't believe I wasted my money on it. That's your business. It's all subjective. That is your perspective. But for me, I don't know what the hell you were expecting from a damn Tron movie. I've seen the first one multiple times. I've seen Legacy multiple times. Well, I don't expect the moon, right? It's not The Godfather. It's not. It's Tron. Seriously. There are themes. There's character stuff. There's cool bits with Jeff Bridges and the like. But it's a movie, at the end of the day, about humans that discover the digital world represented as them, right? Like, it's always been hokey. It's always been a little tricky, right? There's always been a massive suspension of disbelief. A dude gets shot by a laser and transported into the cyberspace, where programs, he asked Ram, what were you, before? An actuarial program, right? Really gives you a great feeling helping folks plan for their future needs. It just, all of that, and then the whole thing with the religion, the users, and the programs, greetings programs, all that, it's all been hokey from the beginning. So I don't know what your expectation for this movie was if you were disappointed in it. I really don't. I wanted to see something that, was faithful to the original, connected to the world, and gave me a solid story with a little bit of depth here and there. And that's what I got. That's absolutely what I got with Tron Ares. I don't understand the people that are so massively disappointed. No, I take it back. I do understand the massive disappointment. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with placing these massive fan expectations. And I get fans all the time that say, well, I don't have massive expectations, I just have standards. Get the F out of here with just you have standards. Okay, you know what? Your standards have your nose in the air, right? You've got your collar popped. Those are your standards. And I have no time for that. I really don't. Tron Ares was a fun movie to watch. It was an enjoyable movie to watch. It was a surprising movie in a number of ways. And that's where I start my high-level thoughts with respect to this film. I enjoyed it. I really did. I had a great deal of fun with it. There were a number of different aspects of this movie that I really did enjoy. And I will start with the cast, because even though this is an ensemble cast for Tron Ares, it's not a big cast, right? It's not a huge cast. I know there's a decent amount of people, decent amount of actors in it, and some get more screen time than others, but this movie is really about 3 actors, if we're talking about cast-wise, right? It's about Jared Leto, it's about Greta Lee, and it's about Evan Peters. I could not remember his name. Well, I just couldn't have the brain fart. I'm keeping that in there. Just completely have the brain fart of that. It's about those 3 actors with respect to this particular film. Because the reality of the situation is that the story centers around those 3. I know that we've got, Gillian Anderson there for a hot minute and here, by the way, spoilers begin. Spoiler warning. Here's your obligatory spoiler warning, especially the detail that I'm about to reveal about Gillian Anderson's character. She's Dillinger's son, or Dillinger's daughter. Ed Dillinger's daughter. The original Dillinger, right? David Warner's character, the original Ed Dillinger, she's his daughter. And Julian, Evan Peters' character, is the grandson, right? So right off the bat, right there, that's something that I like better about this film than I did about Legacy. In Legacy, we got one brief look at Cillian Murphy as the Dillinger heir. And I don't even know if he was playing, I forget if he was playing Julian or however it went. I don't remember exactly how that went down, because I watched the movie like a week or so ago, but I forgot that particular detail, because quite honestly, the game grid stuff in that movie was more intriguing than any of the real world stuff, because there's really not a whole lot of real world stuff. But it's a complete reversal here, right? But there's a lot more connective tissue to the first movie in this film than there is in Legacy. And using the Dillinger Legacy, using the Dillinger name, that I really liked. Really enjoyed that. So, yeah, it's about Ares, right? It's about the program that Jared Leto is playing, Ares, the AI program that essentially gains his own sentience. And then there's Grace Lee's character, Eve Kim, who is like the head of NCOM, if you will. But and there's an emotional story with respect to her and her sister, and their pursuits in life, being the co-heads of NCOM at the time, and how everything evolved into that, right? Like, there's that whole thing. And then there's Evan Peters playing the villain, the absolute villain of this piece, as Dillinger, right? Julian Dillinger in this regard, right? And so, those 3, I don't have any complaints with any of their performances. And it's not like they did anything, like, massively incredible, but they definitely, played the roles as solidly as they could, for how they were written in that regard. And I don't want to make it seem like the writing in this, I'll talk about the writing in a little bit here, but it's not like we're looking for, anything Shakespearean or majorly dramatic with respect to this. Again, we know what this is. We know what these characters are, and we understand exactly what they're designed to do, right, with respect to this story, and it really does center around those 3. So basically, you have a protagonist. Greta's the protagonist. Greta is certainly the protagonist that moves forward this story with her own conflicted motivations. Eve Kim, her character. Julian, Evan Peters' character is absolutely Julian Dillinger. He is absolutely the antagonist the villain of the piece, without question, that is driving forward all the villainous motives of everything that's happening in this film. And Ares, Leto's character, is kind of caught in the middle. And I did have this thought. Like, say you were to cast a non-problematic actor in the role, like in that particular role, if he was interested in playing Ares, a great replacement for this, if somebody was curious about it, probably, in my opinion, would be Keanu Reeves. And that's because the Ares character is playing itself as an artificial intelligence program that is literally learning how to be human, which means there's going to be some roboticism and some technicality in the delivery of the dialogue in the first place. And I feel like Keanu Reeves absolutely nails characters like that, right? That's essentially what Neo is. And in many ways, that's what John Wick is as well, right? Now, do I think that Jared Leto has more emotional range than Keanu Reeves does? Yes, I do. So, I'm not bothered by Leto's performance whatsoever. As an actor, Jared Leto, very good actor. Very good actor. He's perfectly fine in this film. I have no issues with how he played it. I have no issues with what he did, like the range and the technicality and what he does and the evolution of the Ares character throughout the film. I dig it. I really dig it. But I gotta tell you, for me, I really like Greta Lee. And I've never seen anything Greta Lee was in, but apparently she's been in The Morning Show. She was in Law & Order Special Victims Unit about, like, many years ago. Like, she's been in things. And, like, I looked through the whole list because I see this. It was one of those cases where when the movie started, I'm like, okay, like, how long are we going to stick with this character until we just make this all about the programs and Flynn shows up and whatnot? And the movie was like, no, this is your protagonist. Follow her throughout the film. Oh, she's the hero. Okay, all right, gotcha. And so as soon as that was established, I said, okay, let's see how this goes. And I liked her. I thought she was awesome, truthfully. I think she's kind of like a little bit of the unsung hero in this film. Because, again, unless you're somebody that has followed her career, unless you're somebody that's watched everything else she's watched, which I just said I have not, like, she was a revelation for me. She was absolutely someone that I was not on my radar at all, and now she is. I am intrigued by her. I like what she did in this film. I really did appreciate it. And there were some moments that she had in this movie, obviously in terms of being a heroine, but also in terms of some more emotional vulnerability that her character was showing in certain things, especially with the whole subplot about her and her sister and, trying to, cling to her or honor her legacy and the emotional, like, familial part of the journey that she was on personally, being the head of MCOM, right? And, like, the soul searching that she was doing, like, that was resonant with me, and I thought that Greta did a fantastic job of portraying that. Like, the vulnerability and the emotion is there, and that's not an easy thing for actors to pull off. But when they can do it, I find that women tend to do it better, truthfully. But yeah, I found it quite believable, and she was a character that I personally found likable, one that I enjoyed rooting for. Like, okay, I was prepared initially, like, okay, she's gonna die. She's just gonna be like a casualty of Athena or something like that. And yeah, that when it became clear that they were going to, like, value her, a little bit more, like halfway through the movie, I'm like, okay, well, now she needs to live. Now you can't kill her. You've got to keep her alive. And yeah, that turned into a rooting interest for me. And as I mentioned Athena, that reminds me of the fourth person, which, even though I said it is a triumvirate, because you have Leto, you've got Greta Lee, you've got Evan Peters. And Evan Peters, I'll say this before I get to the fourth person, but Evan Peters, with respect to his villainy as Dillinger, I'll tell you what it felt like for me. For me, it felt like we were seeing a mix of the villainy in both of the first two films, right? Because obviously it's Dillinger, right? So there's the real-world Dillinger villainy, if you will. But then I also felt like it was mixed with some Clue villainy, because this dude was just unhinged. He was just completely off the rails, and, like, his separation of, knowing that the grid world exists and communicating with programs was just like, okay, he's got that suspension of disbelief. No one needs to tell him that this is how that world works. He just knows. He just knows, and he's using it and exploiting it for his own gain. And he was properly, like, maniacal and properly batshit out of his mind. And I did appreciate that. I said, okay, you got to be a little larger than life with respect to this. If this is what you're actually going to do, or this is the story that you're actually going to tell. So, okay, So yeah, I had no issues with how absolutely batshit ridiculous Evan Peters was playing this character. Like, it wasn't quite mustache twirling, but it was definitely insane. Like, greedy insane in that regard. So, I get that. The fourth actor I needed to mention is Jodie Turner-Smith. And she's the wild card as Athena in this movie because she very much turns into a major antagonist throughout the course of this film, from where she starts to where she, ends up. And you kind of see that, right? Because if you're dealing with a story where you have like a lead antagonist that's going to make a switch at some point in the movie, well, then somebody else has to replace him as the lead antagonist. And that's what happens with Ares. Ares starts off as, well, he's master control. Like, he starts off as, well, he's working for the bad guy. He's Dillinger's direct program. But then when he starts to question things, when he starts to think for himself and really become sentient, like, that's when, okay, well, somebody else is going to be the bad guy. And it may as well be his lieutenant, second in command, Athena, especially when you get to that point in the movie where Dillinger's like, Ares is gone off book. You need to take him and Eve out and deal with this. Get me the permanence code, if you will. And I'll talk about the writing here in a little bit. But the crazy thing about Jodie Turner-Smith is she has a ton of credits as well, including like Anne Boleyn and a number of other things. And it's like, I've seen her face and I know the name, but this is the first thing I've seen her in? Really? I've seen her in nothing else? Are you sure? Is there anything she was in that was uncredited? I looked at the wiki and I didn't recognize anything. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I glossed something over it. It feels like I've seen her in something before, but I have no idea what it is. I can't determine what it is. So, yeah, that's crazy. But she was awesome. She was really good. Playing the very, like, visceral bad guy, the one that's just a force of nature, if you will, and just follows the orders to the letter, if you will, and it was one of those cases where, it was almost like there was a point in the movie that reminded me of Elementary Dear Data, a second season episode of TNG, because the whole reason that Moriarty gets created and almost takes over the Enterprise is because Geordi misspoke a word. He, instead of saying, instead of telling the holodeck, create a villain capable of defeating Holmes, he said, create a villain capable of defeating Data. And that's what the holodeck did. It thought of a villain that could defeat an android. And it's like, Geordi, you switched one name and damn near got everybody killed, right? And Dillinger does the same thing here. Because what does he tell Athena? He says, by any means necessary. Well, the minute you tell an AI program, a computer program, by any means necessary, everything's on the table. Nothing is off the table. And things are going to get really messy, which they did. They absolutely did. And that was the whole point of it, right? But, yeah, Jodie Turner-Smith absolutely gets her flowers. Absolutely. Not part of necessarily the big triumvirate, but she definitely takes the place of very visceral, very physical antagonist for a good portion of this film. Like, the whole second half of the movie, truthfully. So, those are really the four big actors, the four big performances out of this ensemble cast. I know Hassan Minhaj is there for a little bit. I know Gillian Anderson is there for a little bit. And Arturo, the actor that plays Eve's, second in command, like her partner helping her put stuff together, he's in there as good comic relief, solid comic relief that wasn't too hokey and wasn't too, humor is very subjective. But at no point did he annoy me. Like, he wasn't one of those types of characters where it's like, okay, dude, you can cut back up the jokes. You're making this way too whimsical. Like, that didn't happen, and I was glad that didn't happen. So, for me, I was good with him, but really, it's about those top four, right? It's about your trio, with Leto, Greta Lee, and Evan Peters, and then, throw Jodie Turner-Smith in there as well, right? We can call it the quad, if you will, the quad of actors, if you will. So, no, I had no complaints, no major complaints with any of them. They absolutely did a fine job for the story that they were telling. And as for the story that they were telling, this is where I really do give the movie credit, because I'll be honest with you, when you're talking about a plot for a Tron movie, again, there's not a whole lot there with respect to, what's going on. I mean, I know people want to see, like, this grand and glorious science fiction epic, but seriously, it's Tron. It's not that serious. It really isn't. But there are some themes. There are some things in there, about the quality of life and mercy and longevity and mortality. Like, there are some themes in there. And I do absolutely believe that the writing for this, the script for this, does cover some themes, some heavy-hitting themes, especially when it comes to mortality and the idea of permanence, right? Humanity is not permanent, but we've got this AI program, Ares, who is searching for permanence, right? And the whole point of permanence is, from a capitalistic standpoint, permanence is a big deal for both Dillinger's company and Encom, because they apparently, at this point, have lasers that can create digitally designed matter out of nothing. And they don't really explain that, but whatever, it is what it is. This is the world that we live in. Suspension of disbelief. Just know that they've got massively fast and incredibly complicated 3D printers that can print whatever they want. The problem is they don't last for longer than 29 minutes, and then they just disintegrate. Or, of course, the term for disintegration in the Tron universe is deresolution, right? So they derez. Nobody said derez, even though derez is totally used as the slang, the shorthand, if you will, in the first film. But they derez after 29 minutes. So they can exist in our world, they derez after that. And what's also part of the suspension of disbelief is, again, Dillinger has this knowledge that he can just do this, and that he can just go into the grid and bring programs out as very, sentient AI to come out of the woodworks, right? But Grace and Encom don't know about this. Or at least they're not aware of it, right? Maybe they only have a smattering of understanding with respect to it, but they've never experienced it themselves, right? They haven't gone through what Flynn or Sam did in that regard, as far as going on the grid, right? And that's what I think a big part of this movie is. And that was really what clued me into the idea that, okay, no, Eve is a character that we're supposed to follow throughout this film. When they zapped her to the grid, when they brought her to the grid and basically flinned her for a second, I was like, okay, clearly she is important. But this is also eye-opening for her because she's never been involved in this case. She's never been this involved into this world. So it's an initiation for her, into a level of complexity that she was never familiar with prior to that. And the complexity of her character is that, Encom got sold, right? It was floundering, after Flynn left, Sam took over the company, but he stepped down. And that's when Eve and her sister came into the fact and basically became the co-CEOs of Encom. And they went on two different paths, right? Because Eve's whole thing was all very capitalistic, the space paranoids and the video games and getting, money, if you will, right? The very capitalistic sense of the company. But her sister was all about using the technology to better mankind, or to better humanity in that regard. And this is where it's a bit of a deviation, because what was set up in Legacy was the whole thing with the ISOs and how, these digital advancements in the grid could actually help humanity, if you will. But it's different now because it's all about AI. And understandably so, because it's been 15 years and right now AI is top of mind. Without question, it's top of mind. AI is a big buzzword in terms of conversation. People are talking more about AI now than they ever have been, even back in the Terminator days, if you will, right? So the idea that they switched it to an AI plot doesn't bother me in the slightest. It's topical. It makes sense. And so that's the idea here, is that these grid programs are being used as AI, and there is this humanitarian pursuit that Grace's sister is undertaking as far as looking for this permanence code that she knows Flynn found, but who knows where it is, and all of his personal files and whatnot. And the idea that her sister was in this self-contained pod, I don't know, the North Pole, Antarctica, somewhere, and was searching for it before she died. And that was the thing. At first it was a mystery, okay, well, how did her sister die? Is there some type of nefarious means? And then the scene where Ares is researching her life, and you see the flashbacks, you see them singing Happy Birthday while her sister's in the hospital because she's got a glioblastoma. It's oh, okay. And you just see the emotion on Eve's face, and just, how this has wrecked her, how this has torn her apart, how it made her very obsessive. Because you're wondering, where is the obsession coming from? Why is she so insistent on finding this permanence code if it's just for greedy means? Well, she felt like this was, and Ares calls this out, she felt like this was her last connection to her sister. And she felt like she was never good enough to live up to her sister's legacy, philanthropically speaking, so she was going to do this. She was going to make certain that she absolutely finished this off for her sister, to tribute her sister, to support her sister, because that's how strong it was. That's how strong her sister's presence was in her life. And she was going through the upheaval, right? Like, okay, I'm going to do this one thing, and then I'm going to ditch NCOM. And there's a scene in here where she and Ares are riding in a car headed to NCOM, and Ares basically, very, matter-of-factly, as an AI would, I guess, questions her about her text messages and how she felt about things and what she said, and was definitely getting personal with her, right? This is after they've gone through the grid stuff. This is after, there's been some exchanges and some crazy shit that's already happened to this point. And it's a moment of vulnerability for Grace to, or for Eve to acknowledge exactly what is going on with the character, exactly where her perspective is on life and what her motivations are going forward. And I thought that was a strong scene. I thought that was a really good scene for her character to establish that. And that's the thing. It's like, when it comes to movies like this, I don't need the story, I don't need the script to be like all world, but I do need something that, basically makes the movie one that can stand on its own without relying on the title of the franchise it belongs to, right? So, in other words, if I can watch this movie and say that, hey, this story works whether it's a Tron movie or not, then I think it's solid. It doesn't have to be great, but it just has to be solid. And I think that the emotional motivations, and like if you took Tron out of this, like if Tron wasn't mentioned, like you had all of the other, the other different references and all the Easter eggs and whatnot, there's a ton. There's a whole lot in here, right? But you took all those references, Easter eggs and whatnot out and just made this its own film, with this plot and with these intentions about an AI and the grid and all that stuff, right? Without it being Tron, I do think it holds up by itself as a solid story, right? As a solid story in its own right, with good character development and a story about humanity, right? A story about, what are you going to do? Like, what are your motivations in life, and what type of legacy do you want to leave, right? And what does it mean to be human? Like, what is permanence? Is life even permanent? No, it's not as permanent as you want. And that's where you get the juxtaposition of what Eve is going through versus what Ares is going through. Because Eve is still adjusting to and dealing with the death of her sister, whereas Ares is searching for the meaning of life. He knows that life is there. He doesn't know exactly what it means. And that's what he's looking for, right? And just the juxtaposition of both of those, I think, it is a really good balance. They did a really solid job of conveying that, right? It's not the greatest story in the world. I don't need it to be the greatest story in the world. I don't need it to be Godfather. I don't need it to be Blade Runner, although there is a Blade Runner connection to this movie that I will mention here shortly. But no, I think it's a solid script. I think it's a solid story. There are things that it does as far as the character development, the storytelling, that I do like better than Legacy. And again, some of the themes that we get with respect to humanity and permanence and whatnot, I think do harken back to certainly some themes in Legacy, but really themes in the first movie, right? Like with respect to, humanity and, being human, right? And that was, in 1982, it was dealt with very differently. It was a very different angle that they took with it, not necessarily a mortality angle at all with respect to this. I mean, there was certainly mortality there. There was humanity involved, but this one is a lot more personal story for Eve's character and for Ares as well, as far as the journey that they're taking. Eve trying to still, work through the emotions that she's been feeling over the loss of her sister, and Ares trying to build himself into a human. And what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to have his own sentience? What does it mean to be that type of a human being that actually has feelings in that regard? And I dug that. I really did. I dug that a lot, to be very honest with you. Visually speaking, the movie's impeccable, and that's where my Blade Runner connection comes into place here, because the DP of this movie is Jeff Cronenweth. And if you recognize the last name Cronenweth, if you're a film geek, that's because Jeff is the son of Jordan Cronenweth, who was the DP for Blade Runner. That's right. So, visually speaking, Jeff Cronenweth knows his shit. He's been nominated for 2 Academy Awards. He's a Fincher director, or a Fincher DP, if you will, right? He worked on Gone Girl, he worked on The Social Network, he worked on Fight Club, and he worked on The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So Cronenweth knows his shit. And visually speaking, Tron Ares is gorgeous. It seriously is. It's outstanding. And that's another thing, that another leg up that it has on Legacy. And it's a little unfair because they tried the whole digital, like, face, like digital replacement thing, like with the smoothing out of Jeff Bridges' face, and also Bruce Boxleitner in Tron Legacy. And obviously we're at a point now where it's like, no, we're not going to do that. Technology is improved, but we're just going to use the actors and this type of thing. And that's not what they went ahead and just used Jeff Bridges. They didn't do a younger version of him. He's basically Jeff Bridges. He's basically the Flynn, an older version of the Flynn from Legacy. But I like that they put him in a server from the original film, right? I do like that. So we got to see the original light cycle, we got to see the original game grid, and the original locales, if you will, from the original film. Like, there's a ton of Easter eggs to the first Tron film in this movie, and Easter eggs and references, and I really dug that. I really liked it a lot. There's probably even more that I didn't catch, but there's a ton that I did catch, and I really did appreciate that. I love the way this movie's shot. I love the camera movement. I love the camera angles. I love the grand sweeping visuals and the big scale that we get, not only with the city, but also with the game grid stuff, and with all the tech, the recognizers, the tanks. Like, everything about this film, visually speaking, is phenomenal. The light cycle stuff, oh my god, the light cycle stuff is phenomenal. The light cycle chase in this film, the real world light cycle chase in this film, outstanding, really good, really awesome. You know, and I think that it contributes. This goes a little bit back, and I'll talk about writing, I guess, a little bit more here. I like that it was a personal story, right? And that's what I wasn't expecting. I thought it was going to be this grand, epic war between the humanity and the game grid programs, and it wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. It was a very personal story. It was a story selective to characters who were basically, that involved game grid programs at the same time. And I dig that. I don't have an issue with that. I don't need it to be this grand, sweeping epic. It would have been great if it was. I would have been fine with that. But I like that it was a more personal, character-driven story than something, you know, grand and like massive scale. Like, oh, it's the big war, it's the big battle, and all that shit, right? You know, like which I really think that there were people that were kind of expecting that from this film. But visually speaking, though, very grand, very epic, very awesome. I love the visuals of this film. I love how it was shot. I love the lighting. And I love how it was directed. This is a really, really gorgeous film. Visually stunning film. And really all of them are visually stunning in their own right. The original was groundbreaking for what they could do in 1982. Legacy up the ante, most definitely. And I think this goes even further. I really do. I love I love the colors. I love the shading. I love the shadows. There's a lot about this film visually that I think just absolutely pops and is fantastic. And if you can see it on a big screen, please do so. It's going to look gorgeous in high def at home. It is. It most certainly is. Especially in 4K Steelbook form, which I know Disney's going to release. But if you can see this in the theater, in an IMAX or a big screen at least, please do so. Because, yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Fantastic visuals. But by far my favorite aspect of this entire film, music. We knew it was going to be a banger with 9 Inch Nails, and it was. It absolutely was. 9 Inch Nails absolutely slaughtered this score. It was outstanding. It's great. You know what? Do I like it better than that? Yeah, I do. As of right now, my emotions, I like it better than Legacy's. Daft Punk, I love Daft Punk, okay? No disrespect to Daft Punk. Daft Punk is awesome. What 9 Inch Nails did in this movie, I will say this, and I don't know if this was the theater or if this was the actual mix of the film. There were definitely times where the mix and the volume of the music overpowered the dialogue. And I'm guessing, or at least hoping, that the home mix is going to be better. And I don't know, again, I don't know if this is what the film did, or if the film like intentionally did that, or if it was because of the theater that I was in, and you know, with the sound system, right? But either way, there were times where it was difficult to hear dialogue because the music was so overpowering. But I love the music. I loved the music. So it was such a 50-50. It was like, I want to hear what they're saying. And mind you, it wasn't like for long stretches of dialogue. It wasn't like for major pieces of dialogue where it's like, well, now I have no idea what they're doing because I couldn't hear them over the music. No, I was never lost watching this movie in that regard, like because I couldn't hear what they were saying. But that score was just so vibrant and so visceral and so strong and so powerful, and just, I mean, the industrial electronics, and so good. So good. Seriously, Nine Inch Nails did an absolutely phenomenal job with the score and the soundtrack for this film. I knew they were going to kill it, and they absolutely did. I have no bad things. I have nothing disparaging or negative to say. I'm not a negative person anyway, but I loved it. Music is so important with these films, and really with the Tron franchise. You've got to understand it. There were times, again, like I said before, about how, like, Dillinger's character, he was a blend of, like, Ed Dillinger in the MCP in the first film and Clue in the second film. I really feel like Nine Inch Nails found a great balance between Wendy Carlos's original score for the first film and what Daft Punk did in Tron Legacy. And they brought them together, and they did this great fusion, if you will, where they were different. And there are times where you hear Carlos's original score, especially in the 80s part, where they're in the old game server, you know, from the original film with Flynn and whatnot, right? But there are definitely motifs, and there are definitely different points of the score that you hear that, like, really evoke Wendy Carlos's original industrialized techno classic, right? That original score is. I love that original movie so much. And just the orchestral, like, electronics of the first film, like, you hear that in concert with the more, you know, industrial techno and the modern stuff. You know, and Nine Inch Nails just did a phenomenal job blending both of those, in my opinion, in this particular film. That is by far my favorite aspect of this film, is the music. The music was on point. Fire. Outstanding. Loved it. So yeah, I really dug Tron Ares. I really did. I really liked this film. And, you know, my expectations for it, you know, weren't like so super high as a massive fan of the franchise. I mean, I just wanted to have a good time. Just wanted to enjoy it. The runtime was awesome, an hour and 59 minutes. Didn't feel like a slog. Didn't feel like it you know, drug for me. Like, the pacing was really good. I did dig the more personal story. I really liked Greta Lee. She did an awesome job in her protagonist role. I thought Evan Peters was appropriately psychotic. I thought Leto played his role well as far as Ares was concerned, you know, because, again, as problematic of an individual as he is, he's still a damn good actor in that regard, right? And to me, Tron Ares, you know, regardless of what it does, because I know it did $4.8 million in box office previews, I know it's a $180 million budget, and I know that all of the detractors and all the people that want to see this movie fail or think that it never should have been made for whatever reason, they're gonna be, you know, going straight to the box office. Oh, look, another Disney failure. Tron fails again. Yada yada. I don't give a shit. I don't care, because I saw it. I enjoyed it. I enjoy all the Tron films. If you ask me to rank this one, yeah, I do like this one better than Legacy. I do. And the reason, it's not to disparage Legacy by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of stuff that this movie takes from Legacy as well as the original film. But I just love all the callbacks and all the original, like the direct through lines to the original film. I love that. I love the more personal story. I love the emotional subtext with Eve's character and the journey that Ares is going through as far as becoming human and what it means to be human, and the whole permanence code and whatnot. Like, there's a lot of storytelling aspects and the visuals and the music. Like, there's a lot that I really, really dig. Like how I feel about this movie is very different than how I felt about Legacy when I first saw it. And granted, that was 15 years ago. I was a very different person 15 years ago than I am now. I understand that. But I'm just saying, with respect to Ares, I had more fun watching this film. I really did. And this is one that I would love to see again. I don't know that I'll get to see it again in the theaters, but I definitely, I mean, this is a day one purchase. This is a day one 4K Steelbook purchase, right? It'll go right there, you know, next to my Tron and 4K and my Tron Legacy 4K Steelbooks in the library. Like, it really did a good job with this. I really, really like this. And so, again, the people who were disappointed by it, the people who didn't care for it, the people who wanted more or whatever, like, I really do want to know what the hell it was you were expecting out of this film. Because I got everything that I necessarily wanted out of a Tron movie. I mean, part of me wonders if, and again, because I haven't been on social media today, I haven't looked at all the detractions and whatnot. I haven't looked at a lot of opinions, because I'm staying in the bubble for Peacemaker, because I got to watch that still. In fact, I'm at my apartment now. I'm just sitting out here finishing off this review. But the thing is, like, I have a feeling that a good portion of the disappointment that fans have with Tron probably can be as simple as, with Tron Ares it is, probably can be as simple as they didn't spend enough time in the game grid, right? Like, that's a thing that, where, like, people, whenever you have stories that take place in two different locations, like real world and then the fictional world of wherever, and people are like, well, we want more of the fictional world. We don't want a real world story. I guarantee there are people complaining that there's too much real world in this film. And you know what? Whatever. Because I feel like in the first film, it wasn't necessarily a balance. I mean, the first film's short. The first film's an hour and a half, right? And you spend most of the time in the game grid. But there is a good portion of the beginning, first half hour of that film, that you do spend in the real world setting up, where Flynn is and what's going on with his story and why he even wants in to NCOM's database in the first place, right? And then the second film, Legacy, really doesn't waste time getting you to the game grid. And then you're on the grid for the entire rest of the movie. And I get it. That's where the fun stuff happens. That's where the magic lives. I understand that, right? And it's not like we don't go to the grid here. I feel like this movie has a 50-50 balance of grid versus real life. I do. I absolutely feel that way, as far as like interactions. But yeah, there is some more real world stuff. There is more real world stuff. That's the twist. That's the hook, if you will, right? This is Tron happening in the real world. Like, what happens with real world physics? What happens when regular humans and innocent bystanders in the real world are caught in the crossfire of whatever is happening, what these programs are doing and whatnot. So I dug it. I really did. I really like this film. I personally, yes. My Tron ranking as far as the three films, the first one is still number one for me. It's the one I started with, the one I grew up with. It's my personal number one favorite. Then I would put Ares. I would put Ares second. I would put Legacy third. But it's important to know that I like all three movies. I enjoy all three movies. That to me, there is no, well, I don't really care for this one. I don't really care for that one. No, I like all three. And look, we can talk about the mid-credit scene, right? Okay, mid-credit scene. In the midst of the police coming to arrest Dillinger because his security company has been implicated in all of these crazy attacks that his programs have been levying against the city in the real world, right? He comes up with a bright idea of reversing the laser and sending himself to the grid as it is being disconnected from the real world. And of course, what does he do? He wakes up in the grid, and that is now completely disconnected. It's completely dark, and not quite as bustling with life as it was earlier, right? And he turns around and he sees an old disc, an old identity disc. And if you see, this is where Tron fans get rewarded, because you already know whose disc it is, and you already know where this is going, because you're like, oh, that's not one of the new discs. That's not a legacy disc. That's not one of the triangular ones that Ares had. No, that's Sark's old disc. Sark's old disc from the first film. And I said, oh, okay, we're going down this road. Here we go. And of course, what does he do? He grabs the disc, the electricity comes through, and you start to see the outline of Sark. Of course, for those who don't know, that David Warner played, Ed Dillinger, his counterpart, his program counterpart in the game grid was Sark, with that crazy ass helmet and whatnot. Yes. So here we go. Julian is on the road straight to what his grandfather, or the program equivalent of his grandfather did, where he is in line to become the new Sark, if you will. And you know what? People might consider that corny. People might go, oh, well, of course they're going to do that. Listen, we live in an era of Hollywood, especially with Disney and other studios, where franchises are a thing. And if they can franchise the shit out of Tron, they will. Tron already is a series, right? It's already, now 3 feature films. And if they can extend this further into other feature films, they will do that. So, of course, they want to leave you hanging off to some type of a cliff, right? The movie ends with NCOM getting the glory and, Eve taking the company in a different direction, as far as using the permanence code to help humanity like her sister wanted to. And again, or Ares building a life for himself. And again, Julian retreating into the grid. And, he's now setting the stage for him to return as a grid villain, right? Whether he leaves the grid or not, whether he comes into the real world as Sark or whether they go to the grid for whatever reason and encounter him as Sark, they are totally setting that up. And whether that happens or not, right? It may not happen, right? Because it could totally be a scenario where, this movie doesn't do well financially, and that's it. And all we get really is a Tron trilogy going forward until they eventually reboot the whole damn thing. That's why I say the wiki called this one a soft reboot. It's not. I mean, it's a very soft reboot because, again, there's connective tissue straight to the first movie, and there's connective tissues, dots, and whatnot to the second film as well. Especially not only with Sam, but also Ares. You know, he's talking about, like, he wrote a letter, wrote a postcard at the end of the movie because he's off the grid, pun intended. He said, you know, and he's updating Eve on what he's been doing. You know, learning about life, seeing amazing things among humanity, and he finds, you know, like he had an old article of Korra, right? Korra, remember the program character that apparently had some form of object or some form of permanence code already, you know, being an ISO who was in the world. That's where it's weird. That's where it's a little wonky, if you will, with respect to that. I mean, clearly the AIs are different than the ISOs. The ISOs are probably somewhere else in the game grid, you know, from the legacy film, right? But we see an image of Korra, Olivia Wilde's character, from an old article from the second film, and then he turns it over and he's found a recent picture of her. It's a recent picture of Olivia Wilde as Korra living her life as a de facto human, and he's going to seek her out. He's going to find her. He wants to see how she's doing in that regard. And so that was cool. I like that. I really did like that. That was a nice through line there. So it's a really soft reboot. It's almost not really a reboot, truthfully, with how much it connects to both films in that regard. But hey, I had fun with it. I dug it. I really liked it. I've given all the extensive reasons here why I liked it. So you know what? It's all subjective, of course. People are gonna, you know, feel however they want with respect to this particular film, and that's their business. But for me, I had a blast. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it, and, you know, I would recommend it for people that are definitely fans of the movie, fans of the franchise, if you will. And yeah, no, it was awesome for me. It was completely awesome as far as I'm concerned. Like, I really dug it. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it for sure. All right, so that'll do it for this particular episode of Flight Review on the road, right? This is, again, something I'm going to try now, specifically for movies that I watch, that I do a flight review episode for, where I go see it on opening day and I'm driving home from the theater, right? I've made it home. I've been here for a little bit, so I'm going to sign off here now. Thank you so much for listening to this show. Thank you so much for supporting the Flightcast. If you have thoughts that you want to share about Tron Ares, if you also saw it opening weekend and you want to talk about what you thought about this film, or if you have any other thoughts with respect to movies, TV, and other assorted media that you want to share in the feedback circle, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram on the Flightcast. You know where to find me on BLUESKY at Flightcast. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page. You can comment on the posting for this episode at the Flightcast YouTube channel, youtube.com/the Flightcast. And of course, I can always be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care. Stay safe out there. Have a great weekend. And I will see you all next time. Take it easy.